call the June 20th, 2024 meeting of the Brattleboro Charter Revision Commission to order. The first order of business is to approve the minutes of the May 16th, 2024 meeting. Does anyone have any suggestions or changes or anything to the minutes? Or would someone like to make a motion?
I have a question before we go on, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember for sure, but I thought Bob was not here last time. Was he here?
That is correct. Bob was not here.
Okay, he's shown as present, so
Oh yeah, he is shown as present.
we should make that one change, but with that one change, I would move approval.
All right. Peter moves approval of the May 16th, 2024 meeting minutes with the changes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
I will abstain
Oh.
for being
One.
absent.
So we have, is that 4 of us? Yeah, 4.
Five.
Yes.
Five for approval, one
Yeah,
abstention.
Okay. Yeah. It's hot. Okay, that good. Order of business. Now we're going to take first old business. And Maya had typed up some RTM discussion points. I don't know if these were circulated, I think, when you got the agenda. And she did this so that we just sort of have a top of mind on what the issues that came about at that meeting were. We don't have to go over any of them, but if you had looked at them and you think, oh, there's something that we missed, obviously we keep track of all the meeting minutes all the time. So, but I thought that she did a good job on sort of talking about, in a nutshell, the issues that we talked about. I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts on that.
I guess I'll inquire whether, when we start talking about the process for getting from where we are to where we're gonna be, whether we're just gonna add all these things to agenda just to make decisions. And if we need more discussion about any of them, we'll do that too.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that, we can talk about that next in timeline for commission work if we want to go there now. That's what we have to figure out is the timeline. And if you look at this thing, and I apologize that I sent this late last night, but I couldn't get my life together to do it sooner. In this memo, and Patrick has copied that thing that I sent, and there's a draft timeline on the, was it 3rd page? It's really not even a draft timeline. It's from today until hopefully when we get this to the legislature. And the thought is, this is my thought, you guys can all disagree with me. It takes time for us to do what we need to do and all the things that are required of us that needs to happen to get it to the Vermont legislature. So the earliest we could actually conceivably get it there would be for the January 2026 legislative session. Maya had a conversation with our state senator, Wendy Harrison, who talked to, I think, somebody up in legislative council who said, if we want to get it on the agenda, so to speak, for the 2026 legislative session, we need to get the charter as we want them to look at it to the legislature or legislative council or secretary of state, whoever, by November of 2025. So if you kind of work back there are a couple of things, and I think Bob Fisher's going to try to zoom in a little bit and help us with one of these issues. We haven't had a chance to connect in advance of this meeting.
He expects being able to zoom in about 6:30.
6:30. If we can get him in on this one. So I did this, as you see, July 2024 through January 2026, and sort of put the things in there that we know are gonna happen. Like we know March 2025, there's gonna be the regular RTM. We're obviously not gonna have our special RTM in March when the regular annual meeting is. There is a provision, which is Article 8, which is that paragraph above the draft timeline, that says you have to have a public meeting 60 days prior to your special RTM. So I kind of worked back. If we want to get this to the legislature by 2025. If we have a special RTM September 2025, we have to have a public meeting in June 2025. You see sort of where I'm going with the logic here? Obviously, we can get this done. We can say, hey, we're wrapping up all of our work in February of next year. We don't have to, but the idea is, can we do that? We're not required, as far as I can see, to do any kind of public info meetings beyond what the charter says that we have to do. You know, but I know been talking about in the very beginning, doing what the other charter commissions did, which was to have public input meetings after we have drafted the charter, you know, to just sort of have everybody look at our thing. So I think that is one of the things we're going to have to figure out, is what we want to do. And going back to what David just talked about is, you know, we have to make some decisions, which is, I totally agree. I think we all probably want to just get going and making some decisions. I have this giant Excel spreadsheet that I'm putting together that has pretty much everything that we have talked about, you know, along the way. And what I want to do is, at the July meeting, after we hear about the other charters, have us look at this spreadsheet and say, okay, I think it'll tell us what is it that we really need to look at, and what are the things that we're going to want to, as David says, there's going to be some things we're going to want to talk about more in depth than others. And I think it can help us set our agenda for the rest of the year, because we don't have anything set for an agenda, August, September, October, November, December of this year. But we sort of have to start.
So one thing I think that would be helpful in terms of setting the agenda is, when should we plan on having like a full first draft ready to go if we're planning on having a special meeting in September and have public meeting in June?
Right.
Like, if we're not going to want to have it done in May. We're going to want to have it done sooner than that. So like, I think we got to pick that point and then work around that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's
Question as well. I feel like I recall, and maybe it was the special RTM, but did not past charter commissions present as well at the annual RTM, or it was always the special?
Yeah, it was always special.
Okay.
Because those would be like, we'd have 3-day RTM.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so it is. It's a lot of, I think it's us deciding, you know, what is our goal? Do we want to say we've got our draft and we got it done in December, you know? And I don't know if we can make that I think we have to just make that decision with Maya here in July, but I can bring all the information that I have on all the things that we have talked about. And, you know, then we'll know, I think, a little bit more of, is there something, you know, on this list, RTM list, that we might need more information about, or are we ready to go? So if that makes sense to everybody, we can have that conversation along with the other charter things. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Is that sort of what you were asking, David, or is it?
It is. I think that we've been gathering information for about a year and 3, 4, 5, 6 months. We've talked about a lot of things. And I think that probably the last piece of information sharing and gathering has to do with looking at other charters. Mm-hmm. And then we'll have a full slate of 50 or 100 things that we just need to make decisions about. And a lot of them will be quick that we can just check off. Yeah. But I was trying to draft some language relating to the initiative section, because I promised I would have that for today's meeting, and I realized I didn't have enough information really to draft it yet. And the only things that we've decided so far are to make the document more gender neutral and to strike out the school board provisions. Mm-hmm. Other than those, we haven't made any decisions really, I don't think.
No.
And I'm ready.
Yeah, I think we all were. And one of the things too that goes into this, and I'm not saying we're going to do anything that I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it's something that's in the mix, you know, depending on what we decide to do with RTM. And this is one of the questions for Bob Fisher, which I emailed him the question, but I don't know if he saw it. if say we say we're going to recommend that it's an open town meeting, or say we're going to recommend that the number of RTM members is lower or higher, would we want RTM to be the ones that vote on that, or would we say we think that the town should take that vote? Because we're asking we might say to RTM, we want it to be an open, we're recommending that it's an open RTM, and the RTMs are, I don't want it to be open, and so that's, I think, is a question for Bob Fisher, and that would go into the timing of some of this stuff, like how does that factor in? Yeah.
I think that's right. I think that's a great question to ask Bob, and I think it's also true that when we've had the conversation around RTM versus open town meeting, that if we choose to recommend open, that list of 50 or 100 things gets slimmed down by at least a dozen or a couple of dozen items, because there's details to RTM that we wouldn't have to grapple with.
Exactly.
I'm not suggesting that would be a reason to choose open, but if we, on its merits, choose open, it will simplify the work.
Yeah, and one of the things that, and I did, I emailed Bob those two questions, like what if we recommended this, either one of these, how could the town vote on it if that's what we thought would be best? Hannah.
Just a procedural question. So if we were to do this by special RTM, would it be the same representatives that are elected for the annual RTM?
Yes.
So, just sort of thinking like, even if we don't recommend an open meeting, and we are going to put it to RTM, but there's changes being made to RTM, I think that that's something that we need to decide before those people are getting elected. Because, that might influence who runs and who gets selected, if there are any competitive races, which doesn't seem likely, but it could happen. Just so that, the people are getting to pick representatives who might have a position on those proposed changes.
Right, which means we would need to know that by January, since the election is in March.
And I was going to suggest that it might be a nice goal to try to have a draft of the revised charter ready by February, because then we're going into town meeting.
Yeah.
And then we can be working towards having special meetings thereafter.
Yeah.
So I know we're going to talk about that in July, but that preliminarily seems like a reasonable and a useful time frame.
Yeah, because we have to actually set a time, because if we don't, we'll never get it done. We have to have a goal. So, okay. All right, so if that makes sense with everybody, we can talk more fully, and if Bob comes on, we can ask him this question about townwide vote if necessary when he comes on. But if that makes sense, that's how we'll move forward for the July meeting. And my promise right now, I'm going to do it, is get this giant Excel spreadsheet done, circulate it to everybody far in advance of July 11th meeting, so it also can go on our webpage so that the public can see, these are all the issues that we have been talking about, so.
Also clarifying question, are there 2 July meetings? Excuse me, or just the one on the 11th?
Just the one on the 11th.
The 20th?
Didn't we switch it for you folks?
You did.
Yeah.
I
We
think there was
asked
a
for it to be
lingering
like-
though that kind of looked like there might
twice.
be 2 in July.
Do you want to do it twice, Joy?
I don't want to, not the same presentation, but no, just for clarity on that.
Yeah, no, just July. Right now, I think it's just July 11th, unless everybody,
Yeah, please.
July 11th. Okay.
One quick other note.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, you will.
Just while you were talking about the backup materials for the 11th, we have met and we will be providing a written report in addition to presenting information at the July 11th meeting. But our written report is likely to be pretty last minute. I mean, we won't walk into the meeting and hand it out to folks, but it might only be a couple of days ahead of time.
Not as last minute as me emailing this last night.
I just want to let you know, Bob arrived into the meeting.
Oh, should we talk to him about this? Oh, David, do you want to go?
Well, I
and then
just
we'll
wanted to
ask
note,
Bob?
under old business here, I think it's old business, it does say in these minutes from May 16th that me and Hannah agreed to be back with some changes, at least as to the powers of the people initiative section of the charter. But what I found when I tried to do the work is that I didn't have enough direction yet.
Yeah.
And so I hope that'll be an item that's going to be on the agenda so we can get a
Yeah.
clearer decision point, and then I can draft towards that. Thank you.
I'll get that on. Okay. All right, does Bob want to talk to us for a sec?
I
Is he
don't know.
willing?
Bob?
Hi there.
Hey, Bob, thanks for joining us.
Oh, there we go. Sorry. Hi.
How are you?
Good. Sorry to be late.
That's okay, thanks, no, I appreciate, I didn't get to call you, I apologize for that.
No, I got lucky in that I did not need to go in person over to Pownell, so I was able to do that meeting by Zoom and jump onto this, so that's great.
The one thing we're talking about right now is figuring out the timeline moving forward and like when we can get this done. And we're gonna have a more in-depth conversation about that in July. But I don't know if you can answer these questions now, or these are questions you can think about. We don't know what we're gonna recommend for representative town meeting. You know, will we recommend, yes, keep it at RTM, keep a representative form, but lower the numbers, or keep it as is, or do an open town meeting, all that kind of stuff. The question on any kind of changes, I mean, if we were to recommend an open town meeting, or if we were to recommend, you know, dramatically slashing the number of RTM members, it's obviously RTM that's gonna vote on what happens to itself. So the question is, if we would like it to be the town that decides what happens to RTM, is there a mechanism for the town to vote on that? Or does it have to go through RTM no matter what?
There is a mechanism for it to go through the select board and then to the voters at large. And that happened once in the past when the Charter Review Commission decided to put their recommendations to the board, let the board decide what it wanted to take, and then the board under that's, I think, the second option of charter amendments in the charter, then made the proposals, adopted them, and then that went to the voters at large. So that is theoretically a way to have it not go through RTM. Now, you could go through RTM and then have a referendum vote of that to the voters at large too. So I think that's a second option.
And would we have to do it one way, or could we do, like, say, I'm just making this up, everybody can jump in, but say we just wanted to say, we want these RTM changes to go through a townwide vote, but everything else we're fine going with RTM. Do we have to choose one way or another? You know what I mean? Is it one way, getting it approved, all of our changes? Do you see what I'm saying?
I do. I think legally it's possible to split them out because you could make separate recommendations, and you may want certain recommendations or questions to go to the voters at large and others to go to representative town meeting members. It, I think, is a little bit odd if you do split it out, but I think legally it's possible. I guess what I'm thinking, and sorry, I'm somewhat thinking out loud on this, is if you were going to put it out there as to whether to go to town meeting, open town meeting, is to use your words, and to do away with representative town meeting, that may be one item that you would either make a recommendation or have that go to the select board and then to the voters at large. depending on the answer there, you could take other recommendations through the representative town meeting process.
Now, timing wise, and I don't expect you to know like all these answers to these questions right now, but it's something for us to think about when we're figuring out what the timeline is for us to get this done and get it up to the legislature. I think for us, we need to know, are there different requirements if we were gonna put something on the ballot? You know what I mean? As opposed to, like, do we have to get the select board to get it on? Do they have to have a certain amount of timing? That's the kind of thing we don't need to know it right now, but for July, it'd be really helpful for us to understand what are the different things that we have to do to make it, to get us to the special town meeting, and to get us, if we need to do a townwide vote, what would be the 60 days before this, we have to have the select board do that, and then 15 days before that. Do you see what I mean? We're trying to like back it all out.
Yes. Are you anticipating a special town meeting sometime this fall, or are you anticipating trying to do it sometime in the general nature of next spring annual town meeting?
Well, it's never gonna happen this fall of 2024, because haven't made any decisions yet. So what we're thinking, and again, we don't know anything because some of this is dependent on when we have to do stuff. We were just talking about, we would love to have a draft done in February that, we could circulate around the town meeting to get people thinking about it, and then subsequently do a special town meeting, not in March, but when that is, we don't know. And I read in the charter itself, Article 8, under the charter amendments, it says that there has to be 60 days prior to a special town meeting, there has to be a public meeting. So I don't know, and I'm no lawyer, I just saw that. So I was like, okay, well, there's a 60-day requirement before a special town meeting. So, that factors into when we have to get the draft done as well.
Correct. Yeah. I can outline that. It depends on whether you're going to follow in that article the procedure set forth under the Charter Revision Commission procedures, or whether you jump from that subsection into one of the other subsections, because the procedures are slightly different.
Yeah. And that, I think, like, getting your advice on that kind of a timeline will help us figure out, because if our goal is, because we've all decided we have to have a goal and just pick a date. If the goal is to have a draft of the revised charter done in February.
Total distance 1 mile.
And it's like.
Total time 1 hour 57 minutes and 52 seconds.
Where are you driving?
Being crazy.
Yeah. It's sort of like if our goal is, if we're going to say to ourselves, we're going to have this draft revised, our first draft of the revised charter that we feel really good about together in February, how long will it take us to get from there to either a special town meeting or a townwide vote? Do you know what I mean? Or both. With the goal of getting this to the getting it up to Montpelier, to the powers that be in the legislature, no later than November of 2025. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense, and I can outline that. Where I thought you were going is trying to somehow get this ready for the voters on the first Tuesday of March 2025, and that's not the case.
No.
So there would be two timelines. One, if you're going to take it, make your recommendation, have the select board adopt it, and then have the select board put it to the voters as a whole. That process follows more the typical warnings for a town meeting. The Charter Revision Commission procedures have the series of hearings, the 60-day bit, and that's a little bit longer. So I can outline both of those next month if you want, but I think you'll have a choice of what you want to take each path, so to speak.
Perfect. Peter.
Bob, that sounds great. It also, I think you, when you were thinking out loud about how we might do just the open town meeting RTM question to a townwide vote, and then take that direction and the rest of it to RTM. I think we'd like to keep that. I'd like to keep that option open. I'd like that to be among the things that we consider. That feels potentially like a good choice, so that we take to the entire community that fundamental what kind of town meeting are we going to have decision, and then take the charter, the proposed new charter, through the process that's envisioned to take it to RTM. And so my question is, can you do a third timeline, please, for us that would tee us up doing the things in the proper order far enough ahead of time that we could have on the March 2025 ballot the open versus RTM question, and then subsequent to that the series of events that would take us with a proposed new charter to RTM.
Right. That's exactly, you said it more articulately than I did.
I don't know about that.
As far as that's where I thought you were going, is it would be easy enough to have the grandiose question of, do you want to stick with representative town meeting form of government or open town meeting? That's easy enough to queue up for the ballot in March of 2025. That could be done and fully warned back in January 2025 by the select board. That would then, if we work backwards from that, require that you're making that recommendation or presenting that recommendation to the select board probably sometime in December, at least to get the ball rolling for getting that onto the ballot. Then you could spend the winter finishing up, if assuming kind of option B of if it's going to be continued representative town meeting, then what changes you're going to make, and that could be happening in after first Tuesday of March, and then have, based on that decision in March, make or schedule hearings for the month of April or May in preparation for the adoption based on the Charter Revision Commission procedure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that'll be super helpful, and then we can make those decisions. Patrick.
I think it might be useful for Bob to know as early as possible that the meeting in July is not going to be on the typical day. It's going to be on July 11th. So I think that's the second Thursday as opposed to the third. So just FYI.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions that we think we need to ask Bob about this while we're here?
That all's very goal-oriented, thank you.
Yeah. We have a goal. All right, Bob. I think that's great, Bob. If you can help us with that, and then we can make that decision in July, what our timeline is. That'd be really helpful.
Yep, I'll try to do a flow chart of some sort. So it's probably easier to look at it in a flow chart form, I guess.
Yeah. All right. That's great. Thank you, Bob. We won't make you stay for the whole meeting unless you want to, but that was very helpful.
It's totally fine. I didn't know if you had, I'll just turn off my ugly video here and listen for a while, but if you have questions as you get to the other parts, that's fine.
Yeah, we may have a question about the Capital Grant Review Commission.
Okay, I'm
whatever.
happy to stay on. I may just stop
Okay.
my video.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, so that's actually, I feel like we've just accomplished something big.
Yeah.
Okay, that's something big. That's exciting. Yeah. Okay, now we're gonna move on to new business committees, and I'm so glad we have representatives of the Finance Committee and the Human Services Committee here. And we're talking about these because they came up in the beginning when we were going through committees. And on this little thing that I did for everybody, all this is, do you folks have these, the memo? Okay. We'll start with Finance Committee because it's the first on our list. The two references that you see here, Article 2 and the Addendum C, is what is in the town charter right now about the Finance Committee. Obviously, there is very obvious change that needs to happen is taking up the school, related to the school. The last time we spoke, and David Lovenbach was here, we were talking about whether you wanted to add how many, a number of members. And you had suggested between 5 and 7. So I don't know if you have any new thoughts on that.
Well, I don't have any thought. I'm not chair of the committee.
Okay.
Did you contact Oscar Heller, who's chair, to let him know?
I did not.
This
I
was
didn't know Oscar was chair.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So
we should talk to him.
yes.
Okay.
So, when I spoke to you months ago,
Yeah.
those were comments I pulled together. We wanted to have a meeting and the building was locked against us. We couldn't get in.
Yeah.
So lacked a quorum.
Yeah.
So I spoke on my own behalf. I then informed the committee what I was going to say when I was chair. No one has, stuck a dagger in me yet over what I said.
Right.
But I really can't speak for the committee.
Well,
So the comments I made last time, you want to regard as advisory.
yeah.
As a member of the committee, but not speaking for the committee, one of the other things, we talked about 5 to 7, we're at 8 this year. A little tricky to get a meeting schedule, we got it done. The one other point that I made when I spoke on my own behalf was if it falls below a certain number, that poses a problem. And at the last RTM, our genial moderator did something which I think makes sense, but is not in fact in the charter, and said that the moderator might appoint other members as needed. So I'm not quite sure where he derived the authority to say he would do that. I think it's something that might go into the charter.
I think I remember the other moderators
Did
Yes.
having the same authority. I think
Yes.
Mr. O'Connor did and
Yeah.
Mr. Crisp had.
Yeah.
And I think it's always been voted as part of.
Yeah.
what
I think
was
there's one committee
contemplated.
where it's made explicit, and it's not explicit in the charter.
Yeah, so I think it would be good if we want that to be true for all the different RTM committees that we make it explicit in the charter. The history, though, I think of how it came to be in those motions for the others is because it was explicit for the one, to have the sort of safety net of if there were some departures from these committees during the year and we got down to a too small a number, that somebody would have to populate the committee again, and so that authority was given to the moderator. I recall, I don't know, in something like 2016, 17, or 18, very explicit discussion around that because one of the committees had become kind of depleted during the course of the prior year.
That was before my time.
Yeah. And when we get to human services, I have in the document what was on the RTM warning, which is saying during the, if somebody drops out, the moderator can make the thing. So that is coming not from the charter, but it is coming from what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
That authority is given to the moderator by town meeting.
Right.
Right. Not through the charter.
Right.
And there's two things about the finance as well, if you look at this, Article 2 talks about finance committee, but then in the addendum, it says the members, their terms of office and manner of their selection are set by the town meeting. You know, so whether, you know, it just, if we put the numbers in, we're putting it in the charter, we're not kind of leaving it up to town meeting anymore. You know, so that's just another thing to consider. Oh, David.
To the extent we're having discussion about these committees from the board, from the commission, my position is that the finance committee plays a very important role. It has annually for a very long time. I don't really see a lot that would need to be changed in this definition here, other than maybe making it explicit that the moderator or somebody else can appoint additional members, and then making a determination whether we should decide now how many members the committee should be, and then removing the school district references. Other than that, I think it's very useful to have this committee, and it should be continued forward with whatever minor changes are appropriate. Maybe we can hear from Oscar after talking with the rest of the committee about that.
You may want to remove the RTM's ability to set our compensation.
Yeah,
There's a provision.
I noted that.
Yeah.
And that's been an issue in town about whether people should be compensated for public service. And I would suggest removing that or giving you back pay.
Over time. Okay, so basically what we need to do is, I can just check in with Oscar and he can have a conversation with the finance committee about what they want to set, if anything, number of members. Does that make sense? I think that one is pretty straightforward. We all okay with that? Yeah. Right.
Yeah, or any other recommendations that they would have, but like they're on deadline.
Yeah.
We need, if they're gonna submit something, we need it now so that we can consider it in July.
Yeah. All right. Great, and now we have David Minor. Thank you so much for coming.
Sure.
We were realizing that the Human Services Committee, what your official title, Human Services Review Committee, is nowhere in the charter. And what we wanted to talk to you about is, I'm assuming you'd love to be in the charter. You folks play a huge role, and you do not exist in our charter. And do you agree? Do you want to be, does the Human Services Committee want to be in the charter?
Well, so I've been on the committee for, I don't know, a couple decades or so, and it's always been appointed by, and we've just kind of rolled along, and appointed by RTM, and members, just go from year to year. Some would kind of drag on for a long time, others would kind of come and go. But probably until 4 years ago, the committee was no different than what it was 15 years ago. We had no established budget. We were kind of going by guidelines, by what we've done in the past, by pressures brought to bear by the board. And it kind of went up, the amount granted went up and went down. But largely the applications were the same and the amount of money that we gave out was the same. And then all of a sudden, 4 years ago, we ran into RTM establishing a budget. So for the first time, we actually, as a committee, had a guideline in which to operate. The budget established, I believe, was 1.2%. And with that probably increased the amount that we were giving, probably doubled the amount that we had normally given in the past. But we had an amount to deal with and to work with. And it really took, I think, quite a burden off of us, removed any pressure coming from the town, and we were able then to deal with the applications that we had. The first year of that, we ended up $50,000 underneath, below what the established budget was. The second year, at the same amount, we had applications that exceeded the amount of the budget by $100,000. So all of a sudden now, it really changed. We really had to take a hard look. Nobody received 100% of what they wanted. There were some pretty dramatic cuts. Year 3, all of a sudden now we went to 2%. So now we're over $400,000. And leading into that, the committee, which had been probably 6, 7 people, all of a sudden doubled. We had all sorts of people volunteering. So we had 12 members. The remaining, committee members returning, there were 6, so we had 6 brand new members. And if you look at the period in which you operate, we generally would have a first kind of initial meeting in September, kind of lay out the, the agenda and the timing and everything that we wanted to do. And then, we might go through the application, we create the applications would go out in October for delivery in November. We would have an info meeting, a couple weeks before the final due date. But with that, once we get all the applications, when we receive 20 applications, okay, we would take our 6 people and we divide them all up. Everybody would take and read the applications and we go through them. And we could kind of get through everything in an even flow. All of a sudden now, the applications grew in numbers. We went from a normal about 25 or so to now 35, approaching 40. The requested amounts obviously have grown. And so the amount of effort that goes in within that short time frame puts a crunch on us. We're not a community that operates year round. We operate just within that time. So our deadline is getting everything done so it can become part of the town report and budget report. And so what we talked about at the end of last year was to begin to back our program up so we don't run into a holiday crunch. And so I would probably begin the application early in September, and so kind of make it smoother. Part of the problem with the additional members is that if you're not used to what the process is, if you're not used to what the application is, if you're not used to reading financials, you can feel lost. And so what we did last year is that we had kind of a two-hour sessions where everybody got together, we put together a training program, we walked everybody through the process, we revamped the application, we revamped the process and procedures, everybody got involved, and it ended up to be a really good group. We had a couple of people drop off, so our 12, we ended up with 10. But the concern was, if we had the same sort of enthusiasm with the RTM, and all of a sudden we added 6 more members now, trying to coordinate that with a dozen was difficult, and trying to coordinate it with more would have been next to impossible. Now, we need the numbers in order to be able to read and give an honest effort with the applications and the process, but to have too many creates a chaos, which to manage is really impossible. So that's why we ended up with recommending that we cap it at 11. We have 8. The budget again is 2%, so we're going to be closer to $500,000. And if it's a repeat of what we went with the first time, and the increase to the 1.2, whatever it was, does that mean now that we're going to be over $500,000 as far as the application process? That could very well be. And there are some things that we've talked about as a committee as to how we'll go about that, how to best manage it, so we'll see how the process goes.
Would you like to be in the charter?
What? I'm not sure what would that provide?
That was a way excellent explanation.
It was.
Thank
It
you so
was.
much. You know, we don't ever really get to hear, you know, from beginning to end how it all unfolds. And I think that the structural question, whether the Human Services Review Committee should be in the charter, isn't really something that, you know,
No, I think they should.
I think it should too. And
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you don't have an answer, particularly.
Well, let me ask you, okay, so if it becomes in the charter, I assume it becomes in essence permanent. Although I think that over time we've become permanent. Does that mean that if it says there's 11 members, that's all you can have? Does it limit what we can do and we can't do? Because right now, there really is no definition. You know, what is defined as a human service? That's one thing that we've really grappled with as a committee. And do you cap the amount of application? If all of a sudden we begin to receive a lot of applications, $50,000 each, there are a number of organizations that don't need that amount of money, but the money we give is meaningful. And all of a sudden, if you begin to having to cut, do you cut everybody? Because if you cut everybody by 10%, it's bigger pain on those asking for less money than those asking for more money. So right now we have some flexibility to deal with that. With the charter really, define us and put us in a box.
Oh, no.
Go ahead.
There's Bob Fisher too on that.
Oh, do we want Bob to go or? Because I have a suggestion.
If I just didn't want to talk out of turn. I think that it should go into the charter for a legal reason. And that is that by statute, people have the authority to petition to have human service agencies voted on at town meetings. And we have this great process that David just explained, and it works beautifully. And we voted on it formally recently or over the last few years, which has really helped. But what it is it's a legal delegation to a committee that does an end run around how most other towns get articles onto their annual town meeting warnings for funding human service agencies. And in some towns, granted they're smaller towns, you may have 6 or 8 articles on funding A, B, C, D, and E human service agencies. Mm-hmm. Now in Brattleboro being a hub town, you have far more agencies, far more requests. It would take up a much, much larger time at town meeting. And so the procedure that you have works very well. Putting it into the charter makes it law so that people can't do an end run around the process. So that's my only comment there.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
The way in which the Human Services Committee interacts with town meeting is a matter of historical record, but it's really not clear. And I think that it would be very important, just like the Finance Committee. I think it belongs in the charter, and we should be writing up a clear definition. There's flexibility can be built in, but also defining the role of the Human Services Review Committee and how it interacts with the town meeting's decision ultimately. I mean, people wanted to go in and change individual line items, and must be 8 or 10 or 12 years ago that the determination is that's not what's happening anymore. They're making their determination. It comes in for an up or down vote. So I'm in favor of having that drafted up. I've got one other issue about that. I think just as an ordinary process sort of matter, asking the same question every year, what percentage should be applied next year, is not really the best process to follow. I don't know how to reconcile that,
Right.
but having the same discussion every year on that same question, what should the percentage next year be? I'd like to see if we can figure out a way to enfranchise people in that decision, but not have to take up time asking the same question exactly the same way every year at town meeting. So I don't know how to get there, but, because I know the town meeting likes having that discussion, but I don't think as a process matter, it's really the best way to go annually.
David,
Several years ago, we in the Finance Committee dispatched one of our members to sit and observe. And we did that after a more recent period than you said of 6, where in 2019, I think it was, people went in and upped specific amounts for specific groups. And what we were trying to do in the Finance Committee was sending in a monitor, never said anything, but simply to be able to go to RTM and say they had a process, it was a reasonably developed process, they followed that process, don't mess with it. The problem for RTM is that individuals have not seen the applications, but all of a sudden say that it should be this amount or that amount. So the question is, I don't know whether this is legally permissible, have RTM set what the amount is for the next fiscal year, but that the RTM is limited to voting their decisions in the warrant article, up or down, and they can't adjust those numbers. That's not to prejudice line item changes in the general fund budget, but on the RTM budget, I think if you haven't looked at the applications, you're in no position to say this group deserves more or less.
Well, and actually, that's in line, I think, with what David was saying, in kind of being able to establish some rules of the road, and putting it in stone so that everybody's on board, because it was just a few years ago that whole budget process, from Human Services became chaos, and it was, individuals, that wasn't so much a line item veto as it was a line item dispute, and so I think that would that would be helpful, and I think in putting the box together, as David said, it kind of create the rules of the road, but build within it the flexibility, because we really need to be able as a committee to move quickly, depending upon the type of applications received, the amount of applications and come in. We need to have that flexibility, and if it becomes too rigid, then that becomes something else to have to try to work with and accommodate.
it can be, based on what Bob Fisher just said, it's just simply doing it so it's made very clear to everybody. The Human Services Committee they're the ones that are empowered to make this thing. So it doesn't even have to be some giant thing in the charter. It's enough to anoint you folks. This is what the Human Services Committee is, and here's what they do. And
I think along those lines, Kate, I think it seems like every year there are 2 or 3 individuals that get up and talk about the kind of historical perspective of the committee, and say that we've gotten to the point as RTM to accept what all the time and effort the committee's put in and move forward. And everyone kind of goes, and so what you're talking about is kind of putting that in the box. And I think, yes, that I think would be very beneficial.
yeah.
I don't think we're going to be trying to make a decision tonight, but just in the continued food for thought, I think there's a lot of merit to what's been just discussed around certainly solidifying, formalizing the role of the committee, making it clear in the charter that they have the authority to do what they do and that they're the focus of this work. I have a little bit more of a mixed feeling about it having to be just purely an up or down vote, but we've had lots of consideration certainly over the years about both the idea that when it's changed without benefit of that thorough review of the submittals, as well as respecting the group's investment of time and energy and effort in bringing thoughtful recommendation to the RTM. If we land in the place of solidifying in law that it's an up or down vote based on those considerations, I think we then need to think, David, about allowing RTM the freedom each year to adjust the target.
I agree, because I don't like the idea of it being in the charter that this is what the number is.
That's not what it should be.
Yeah. Well, I get what you're saying too.
I'm sorry?
I get what David's saying too.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to that if RTM has the authority to adjust the particular allocation in any given year.
Right.
I don't think we should fix both of them as unable to be acted upon by RTM.
Right.
Or OTM.
Okay, whatever it's going to be.
Whichever TM it ends up.
Okay. Okay.
You know, I think that, can I?
Oh, yeah.
I think that moving forward on the language for the charter for the Human Services Review Committee will require some drafting and some consultation. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I'll take on, maybe Hannah wants to work with me to draft up some language after consulting. David, if you want to talk with other members of the committee about that, so we can start working up a proposal for what would be included in the charter for that.
And I think it's important that the Human Services Committee is in it because of the important role that you do. I mean, if you go through the charter and look at the committees that are in the charter, we're about to talk about one that does nothing, and they're in the charter, and you folks actually do something really important.
Super important.
And it should be recognized. And
Was it, Patrick, is it 25 years ago? I mean, when did Human Services come about?
It's a good question. Back in the 70s, it was the petition method. Mm-hmm. I know there were warnings back then that had multiple individual articles for individual agencies, but I don't know when it switched.
I know that Bob has in the past pulled out the language from other business when we decided to delegate the decision making to the committee. And if Bob is still listening, I would ask if he could locate that language again and send it to me. Because there's some enabling language under other business which clearly is not binding, but which has served as a direction going forward. And if I have that language, it'll help. Thank you, Bob.
There we go. I was just trying to unmute. I recall the same memo that you're recalling, David. I will look for that. We have the dates in it. A lot of that had to do somewhat with the history of how it was, but also we always tended to bring that up under other business, and of course, other business had been non-binding. So it was the proverbial question of could we have a committee set up under other business that was non-binding. So that's why it went to a formal article vote to create the system in the recent past. But I'll try to find that memo and shoot it over to everybody. I don't know as I know exactly when the Human Services Committee started, but we can find that out.
Thanks, Bob.
all right. So I guess we've decided we do want to move forward with putting human services.
Just one other question. This is just is it required that a requirement that a member of any of the committees be actually a member also of RTM?
Well, I would say
That is, I raised that question with respect to the Finance Committee a while ago. It's not explicit. I think the understanding was that Finance Committee members were elected from the floor, from the membership.
Well, we can talk about that as we draft this language and debate one way or the other.
Yeah, so it doesn't, what, on the warning for last year's RTM, it does not say that the 11 people have to be RTM members. They're
Right.
elected at RTM. So that's a good,
I was just curious.
yeah. Mm. Yep. All right, so we know where we want to move forward with that. You folks will work and involve the human services. David, you work with them. Great. Thank you.
If you write your email address down. Before you leave, if you write your email address down.
All right, and now, this one, we might need Bob's advice on this one. The capital grant, review committee. Patrick and I were talking about this. Actually, capital grant review board. It's in the charter, the RTM appoints members. Like, it never meets.
Right.
And we have no idea really what it does, Patrick was thinking, and no one there doesn't seem to be any real reason that it exists. So I think it's our decision, do we want to recommend that it's gone? And if we're basically it's something in there that does nothing that we know of.
I think I can shed some light on why it does nothing that we know of, but you've got a question you want to ask Bob. I want to be careful not to
Oh, I just wanted to ask
crowd
Bob.
into that.
No, my question for Bob was, is there any legal, reason that this exists?
Sure,
in
so
our
let's
town?
start with that. Is there any legal reason why we have to have this in our charter?
I do not see any legal reason why we have to have it in the charter. That section of the charter has always intrigued me, because if you're really looking at capital grants, from a practical standpoint, we do that through our grants manager, through the administration. And to my knowledge, I've at least never met with the Capital Grants Review Board. And so it's up to you, but I think the recommendation to disband it or take it out of the charter makes sense. You do have, it's not like there's no review of capital grants. That's being done through the administration. Obviously, the select board has a role in all of that with its budget. And then the finance committee is also a check and balance. So I just think that we have enough checks and balances on that, unless other people can come up with policy reasons to keep it.
Peter,
Yeah, well said, Bob, thank you. And that is exactly why it doesn't meet. I don't know when it started not meeting or if it ever met. But I know I became the town manager in 2015 and encountered this provision pretty quickly, pretty soon after arriving, and kind of poked at it a little bit and tried to understand some history. And Patrick and others helped me understand that in 2015, they really weren't sure when it last met. I know that between 2015 and 2021, we never had a meeting. I don't think there's been one since. And for the reasons that Bob said, we don't need this. It's a at best archaic, and maybe just some sort of historical language that's there that somebody had a thought about sometime, but it hasn't been used, and it isn't useful because of the wherewithal of our town staff. In some of the little tiny towns, you might want to have a group of citizens, just as there are groups of citizens who do the administrative work of the town in many cases in the little tiny towns. You might want to have one of these for considering whether or not to apply for a grant. But between the robust staff that works on these things, and then has to, in every case, bring grant requests to the select board for approval before proceeding with actually implementing a grant for a project, there's plenty of wherewithal of the town to do the vetting that's needed without having this cumbersome process that would actually, in some cases, likely slow us down enough that we would miss opportunities to seek grants. So I think that it's important, actually, that we remove this from the charter.
Everybody pretty much agree with that? Yep.
I'll just say that the finance committee has never looked at proposed grants, but they do come up before the select board. And finance committee members should be monitoring the select board. So there is that way to weigh in, but it's not been a general practice of ours.
Yeah, and unless the practice has changed, grants as little as like $700 or $1,500 go on the select board agendas. Yeah. Years ago, we did start putting the more perfunctory ones on consent agendas, but they're still there so that they're transparent to the public that there is a grant that's being applied for and received. And the more significant grants that might have more to weigh in the decision of whether or not to go for the grant and go, pursue the project, get full discussion at the select board meetings as well. So there's opportunities for public involvement.
Okay, that's an easy one. Okay, the next one, and Bob, you may have some thoughts on
We want to
this.
make a motion now?
Oh, yeah, let's
So we can decide something?
Yes!
May I move it?
Yeah, please.
I would be delighted to move that we remove the Capital Grant Review Board and any reference to it from the town charter.
Oh my God. Peter has moved that we remove the Capital Grant Review Board and any mention of it all out of the charter. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? You just saved it like a tree there by getting rid of that. Great. The next one is the Charter Revision Commission. And the question that we've been pondering about this is, what does every 15 years mean? Where does the clock start ticking on the 15 years? So, Bob, do you have any thoughts on, if we can clarify this, we think it's important to clarify it.
I don't think it's all that clear. It's always been, and people have had differing views on it. Is it 15 years from when the Charter Review Commission is appointed, or is it 15 years from when the Charter Review Commission finishes its work? And from my standpoint, it should be up to your commission to pick one or the other, put it in there, and then there's clarity. From a legal standpoint, I don't think it much matters, what the time frame is, whether it's once every 10 years, 15, 20 years, but just have clarity as to when it starts and when it runs from.
Can I ask him a question?
Yeah.
Bob, if there isn't a provision for this in the charter, is there underlying statutory guidance on how frequently a town needs to review its charter?
No, other than there is the ability in the statute to amend a charter by petition. And frankly, and that's under Article 8, the first option, it references that statute.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be done pretty much at any time.
Right.
So absent that, I'm not aware of anything because charter review commissions are a rather unique body to Brattleboro. So most other towns just do it statutorily.
Yep. So a little bit of foreshadowing for our report next month. What I've seen, at least so far, and based on the table that we're sharing, where we're entering data that's building what we will bring to you next month, I haven't seen any exceptions to this. There are a handful of communities in Vermont that have charters and have provisions like this one. I've only seen, I think, in one case 10 years, and in several cases 5 years. I've not seen any other for 15. And I've seen a whole lot of charters that have no reference to it whatsoever. So based on the observation and advice that you've offered, Bob, I think we have a substantive question before us, not just about how to better define what 15 years means, but whether even we need to do that. Do we want to have a required interval at all? And is 15 years the right interval?
Right. And you folks will have some insight or have some information to share with us next.
We will have information to share with you that might be more or less what I just said, or might have something a little more complicated to offer when we've finished reviewing the final ones that we haven't been through yet.
Okay. So we're not putting this decision off just for the heck of it. You will have some information in
Absolutely.
July 11th
Yes.
that can help us. Then we
Yes.
can make a decision. Then, does that, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to act like I don't want to make a decision.
No, I think there's good reason to wait.
Okay.
There's,
Okay.
I don't know that we're gonna get guidance of any kind out of the data that we bring, but you'll be able to see in front of you instead of just, hearing me say it,
Right.
sort of what the mix is. And by far the norm in other charters is to have no mention at all of a particular interval.
Okay.
Well, it seems to me that stability in the governing document for the town is a good thing. And I don't see the need to have a review process, a formal review process every 5 or 10 years. 15 years seems like a good interval, and 15 years from the end of the prior process seems like a reasonable number.
Disagree.
Yeah.
I mean, we make changes intermittently as things come up in between, and then once every 15 years, half a generation, looking back at it in order to see if it still meets the needs of the town seems like a reasonable thing.
Yep. Yeah, I don't mean to be arguing that we shouldn't have it,
I'm just-
only just sharing the data that most places don't.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we should, I want to have it somewhere that says it has to happen, because I'm the paranoid person who thinks that the people in control will say, well, we never have to do it, you know what I mean? So I just,
Well, and the alternative would be, if you don't say it has to happen, then it's only gonna happen in the most extreme situations, and I think it's really important to have sort of this
exactly.
perfunctory review so that it's not just being made when there's like catastrophic changes. And
Yeah.
the one thing I would advocate for as an alternative to having it from the end of the last commission is it's a lot easier to keep track if it's like because there's no set length for how long the commission has to act. And so, it having it just be every 15 years, regardless of how long the last process took, makes it easier to keep track of when the next one is.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, we'll get insight on that on the 11th, and then we can decide. I would think we could decide. And I think that is the list of committees that we were talking about tonight. And I don't know if anybody has any other business that they want to talk about. Oh, David.
Yeah, I was gonna mention this earlier when you were talking about the timeline, but then I realized the commission hadn't done anything in all these months, except now you have. And I realized the minutes will be up on the website,
Yes.
but you've now made a decision to eliminate the capital review, whatever. I would like to ask, every time you make a decision, even if it's tentative, that you do a news release about that decision. Now, rather than waiting until all the language is there in such a way, because that makes it harder. But I mean, if you go, for example, to 100 RTM members, at least you should, and that's announced, then at least it gives the public an opportunity to immediately come back and say, too many, or whatever. So that's a request I'd make of you.
Yeah, well, I'll get a whole bunch of people that want to be on who are on it are going to come and say, we don't want it to go away. Okay.
Right.
Right.
Can we go back to Maya's list just for one picky
Oh, yeah.
clarification?
Oh, yeah.
I made a note of this and then I neglected to say it when we were on that item, that under the, I don't know, it's about the 6th item down, hold multiple RTM meetings each year.
Yeah.
And then there's 4 sub-bullets underneath that. I ask my colleagues to forgive me because I harped on this a little bit last time, and now I'm bringing it up again late in this meeting, and it isn't a piece that's important to me for us to consider. It's not important to me that we do it, but I want to make sure that we give good, full consideration to the possibility of multiple meetings throughout the year that would be shorter meetings and for a narrower array of topics in each meeting. And I don't think this item fully covers that idea. It covers some other ideas about like districts having a district meeting or some other things that people, some other aspects of this that people might choose to do to keep our team, keep that process alive more throughout the year. But I'd like there to be either, one of the sub bullets, or probably really its own separate bullet, being the question of should the business of the town meeting, whether it's RTM or OTM, be divided into seasonal pieces.
Because you were talking about doing all the budget stuff at one meeting.
Right. And then at least one other meeting during the year that would be for other things, and perhaps more than one.
Right. Because it's also dependent on when we have to set a budget.
Exactly.
And have the day.
That's
so,
right.
Yeah.
You did clearly present that topic the last time, and it was not presented that way in that list.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember that too. Okay, I'll put that on, I'll make sure I got that right. Okay.
Thank you.
And so the next meeting is July 11th, and we will have the much-awaited presentation about what's in other charters, and then we will set our timeline, and we thank Bob Fisher for helping us so that we can set the timeline in July, and we'll continue to work with the Finance Committee and the Human Services Committee to get that language fixed for those. Joy.
Would you like to hear at all about the?
Yes, we talked about this. Joy, I totally forgot. We talked about this earlier. Joy.
No worries. So the town of Brattleboro held their first committee open house, if you will. So all of the boards were present, and I was present for Parks and Rec, representing them, and ended up I could help with charter as well. So I was able to move them side by side. And I didn't know that I was going to be representing, but it was still very good, especially because in some ways, while it was an open house to show all of the committees that exist, it was also, there's so many vacancies on the committee, so it was also like a pitch to tell people more. So I did have to tell a few people that were interested in our committee that while we are a full board, please come to the meetings and that sort of thing. But only about a handful of people talked with me. I'm not gonna lie, it might have been a little bit of a draw that I was with Parks and Rec that had some fun flyers and colors and things. So it might have been a half draw. There was also candy nearby. But there definitely was somebody who came and spoke for a moment who said that she recalls her parents being at RTM that started RTM. So that transition to RTM, now she is in her 80s and she does not like RTM. That her neighbors or her representatives do not represent her. Of course, I encouraged her to consider becoming an RTM member, that is how you get your representation. And she said that she should slow down. Her kids say she should slow down. So it's well, maybe your neighbors if you tell them. And of course, I encouraged her to message in that opinion, but that it would be something that I would share, that these are the things that we need to hear. I did not get her name on purpose for the type of interaction we had, but it definitely was a good moment to have something represented of us there in that quick moment. Of course, there were the faces that we have seen before and a few more side conversations, but otherwise that was the one that stuck out the most. But so as we continue to show up in these other venues, these will be probably the anecdotes that will bubble up.
Yeah. I'm actually glad that to be honest with you, I said I would go, but I totally forgot about it. So I felt
and it changed locations, so there was a little confusion too.
Yeah.
So
well, I'm glad you did go, because just people seeing Charter Revision Commission will go oh, what's that? And it educates one more person that what we're doing. So I really appreciate, even though you were straddling the Parks and Rec fun table with the
with the charter. Yeah.
I'm glad you did it. I appreciate that.
No, it was very good, I would say, and I hope the town does the open house again, the sort of committee open house. It was very good.
And we'll get charter cookies or something. Thank you, Joy. Anyone else had anything else?
I move to adjourn.
All those in favor of adjourning? Thank you, everybody. See you July 11th.